Welcome to this, the 39th episode of Qatsyr Harvest. This is the prelude to Shabat, which is the upcoming ingathering of God's people. At this point, it is just 13 months away, so you have very little time to prepare yourself should you wish to join us on the ride of a lifetime. In our last program, we had begun to consider what the prophet Hosea was inspired to say on behalf of Yahowah, speaking to Israel about these days. He began reciting these words. Hear this, those who are priests and who have become religious leaders. Pay attention and be attentive to what you are hearing, family of Israel. So as we begin, who do you suppose that God is speaking to? Wasn't that Israel? Isn't that transliterated today as Israel? Was he not speaking to the house and family of Israel? Is he not asking them to pay attention? Well, the reason this is important, of course, is that he's rebuking the religious leaders of Israel, would be rabbis today. And he is condemning their propensity to be religious and the damage that does to his people. It also undermines the notion of Christianity, which in its New Testament demonizes and dehumanizes Jews so that they can rob them of all the promises God has made to them. But that doesn't hold up when you recognize that God is, in fact, speaking to his people, trying to get their attention here in the last days so that he can resolve his relationship with them. Home of political leaders, open your ears to hear as tools to calculate and consider. For this assessment applies to you. Oh, he's talking really too well. There's a very handsome co-host there, Wookie. I appreciate you trying to coordinate apparel here with me. So, God has two foes among his people. And it's interesting that those foes are the most respected among Jews, which makes God very unpopular, which is probably why they never say his name. He is speaking to the religious leaders and to the political leaders, and he is accusing both and providing this prophetic assessment of his evaluation of them. God is anti-religious and apolitical. Indeed, because you have become a snare, a dangerous means to control others. La mitzpah, with observances and edicts, in addition to a net, all spread out upon Tabor, a broken and confused world. Hosea, he liberates. Hosea 5:1. So God's assessment of his people's, Israel's, propensity to be religious and political is that politics and religion in Israel, which would be that which is influenced by the Haredi, which is the ultra-Orthodox version of Judaism and the controlling force of Judaism in Israel. They are parasites with absolutely no value whatsoever. And the political and Israel that are really divided into three segments. The most shrill and the most damaging are the progressives that would literally undermine Israel and give it to the Muslims and think they're doing a wonderful thing, whose sexual preferences mean more to them than the survival of the state of Israel. who are complete and utter hypocrites and are doing everything they can to reverse the last election by claiming that they are the voices of democracy. The more popular political position in Israel are the right-wingers. And there's some interesting characters in the right wing that I think have a pretty good grasp on reality, but there's also lots of them that have chosen to ally with the ultra-religious, and in so doing are part of the problem. And then you have this middle ground of varieties of people that will form a parliamentary consensus with whomever to grasp hold of power. Israel is in serious trouble in this regard. And that's what Yahweh is speaking to. And his assessment is that religion and politics exist for a single purpose. It is not for the betterment of the people. It is to control them. And Yahweh is an advocate of free will. He is an advocate of liberation. And so when politicians and rabbis seek to control large numbers of people, and the rabbis absolutely doing this. I mean, you have rabbis now that are telling the Haredim that they cannot serve in the IDF, that they must renounce any call to service and become criminals. This is a horrible situation that Israel finds itself in. And God is not impressed. He says that your politics and your religion exist as a dangerous means to control others. And that your observances and your edicts are being spread out in a very hostile manner upon a broken and confused world. To a large extent, Jews have been their own worst enemy. I wish it weren't true, but it is. And they have brought all manner of harm upon themselves. And if you really think it through, the three religions that have been the most harmful to Jews are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And all three are the product of Jews. All three are the product of rabbis. Paul was trained as a rabbi, which is how he was able to craft his 14 letters against Yahweh, the Torah, the very Son of God and Messiah, Dode. Had he not been trained as a rabbi and not understanding, but at least knowing what God had said, and then with that twisted mindset that is so argumentative and hostile and rebellious, those 14 letters wouldn't exist, and the Christian New Testament wouldn't exist. There would be no myth of the counterfeit, Jesus Christ. And therefore, there would have been no dehumanizing, degrading, demonizing treatment in Europe. There would have been no Holocaust without Christianity. You wouldn't have been accused of killing the Christian God. Judaism was created second among these three religions, and it was a response to the growing popularity of the mythos that Paul had conceived in his counterfeit Messiah. And to challenge it, Rabbi Akiba, the father of Rabbinic Judaism, came up with a fake Messiah of his own, Bar Kokhba. You should know that name because he's son of a star. You parade underneath that star, falsely attributing it to David. And that is what led to the diaspora and the third and final assault on Judea by the Romans. And then 500 years later, after the Babylonian Talmud had been written and Jews were making a living in Yathrib, and Muhammad moved into town when he ran out of material for his Quran and needed something to make his terrorist regime, his criminal enterprise, seem religious. He bought Talmud readings from the rabbis. And everything in the Quran that seems religious is actually a direct result of rabbis selling Muhammad that material, which Muhammad then twisted to suit his agenda. All three religions are the product of rabbinical malfeasance. And think of the harm that has been done to God's people as a result of them. This is God's point. He goes on to say the rebellious insurgents who are openly defiant, speaking of political and religious Jews, are intensely and deeply murderous, even genocidal. And so I will judge them, inflicting the appropriate penalty on each of them, which is to incarcerate the totality of them. Hosea 5:2. You know, it's pretty shocking when we hear God, his name is Yahweh, accuse his people, religious and overtly political Jews, of being murderous, genocidal. But that's how God sees it, because the politics and the religiosity of Jews is what has estranged them from Yahweh all this time for 3,400 years. The children of Israel on the Exodus couldn't get out of their own way. They brought the tragic religious myths, deadly, demonic religious myths of Mitzrayim with them, and they would never give it up. And they still haven't given it up. Even when Elia did such a spectacular job of condemning the religion and politics of Israel, even once God killed the prophets of Baal and Asherah, once God killed those who had manufactured the golden calf immediately at the beginning of the Exodus, even as God routinely denounced those who were religious and political, Jews have continued to be so. I mean, they claim to be Torah observant, and yet the Torah is a decidedly anti-religious book. The Torah condemns the people's propensity to be religious. The prophets condemn Israel's propensity to be religious and political. This is condemning both the politics and religion of Israel. And what God is saying is that you are so antagonistic. You're so rebellious towards me. You're teaching so many and perpetuating so many lies that are hostile to the relationship. You're genocidal. And he probably could have said suicidal, because he is not concerned that Jews are doing what Muslims are accusing them of doing, of going off and perpetrating genocide on Fakistinians. It's kind of hard to perpetrate genocide on a people group that doesn't actually exist when the term is based upon ethnicity, and the Fakistinians don't share any ethnicity. And the number of Fakistinians, of course, has grown considerably during this purported genocide, which means their claims are pretty stupid. But what God is saying is that you're effectively committing genocide on yourselves. That had you not been religious and political, had you focused on the relationship, have you not erased God's name, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. The genocide perpetrated against Jews in the Islamic countries would not have happened. This growing tide of anti-Semitism sweeping the world right now and leading towards events worse than the Holocaust would not happen. And so he is accusing rabbis and the political leaders of Israel with being genocidal to themselves. And if you look at the response of Israel's politicians before, during, and after October 7th, you'll understand his point. Before October 7th, they said and did things that made October 7th possible. Israel has been unwilling to recognize that Islam is their enemy, and Islam has been their enemy for all 1,400 years of its existence, and yet they want to integrate Muslims into their country. That is suicidal. Because the IDF likes big fancy airplanes and tanks and high technology, and revels in their prior successes against the militaries of Egypt and Jordan and Iran and et al., Syria, that they have really no interest in trying to defend Israel from a horde of Muslims on motor scooters and on foot. And so when you had the copy of the Islamic flood of Alaska in your hands, when you had video surveillance of them conducting practice runs for it, when you had all manner of intelligence saying this is going to happen, and you have the playbook of how it's going to happen, you did nothing. In fact, you moved 2 battalions of IDF up to protect the Haredim as they were trying to antagonize Muslims for a religious add-on to something that never should have been celebrated as part of Sukkah. You invited it. And then for the 12 hours after it, you did nothing. 5 minutes after the alarms went off with the breach of that fence at 6:30 in the morning, you should have had every reservist, every active duty IDF member, every police officer, you should have had them all right there along that fence. You should have sent every tank, every Apache helicopter, every personnel carrier, all of them should have been along that fence, because the first breach was only a tiny fraction of the numbers that came through that fence over the next 8 hours. And you didn't stop them from taking any of your abductees back into the Islamic hellhole. You were a complete and utter failure of the IDF. Not only in advance of 10/7, but during 10/7. And after 10/7, what are you doing? You're buying more F-35s and F-15s. Spent what, $20, $30 billion last year buying American weapons, bombing more places in Gaza. I mean, you were in Gaza for a year. You exterminated 20,000 Islamic jihadists, and now there's more than there were there before you invaded. And now you're going back in expecting the same exact strategy to have different results. Fact is, because you don't know who your enemy is, Israel, you can't defeat them. And even now, when October 7th, Part 2 occurs, and it's 1,000 times worse, the IDF will have absolutely no ability to stop it. So God knows how vulnerable you are. He also knows that you've come to believe that Donald Trump is your guy, that he's in Israel's corner, even though his representative is owned and operated by Qatar, who's financing your demise. Even though his son-in-law is owned and operated by Saudi Arabia, and he was the author of the Abraham Accords. Even though the rhetoric out of his mouth is insane. Resorts in Gaza, emerald cities for Palestinians, and the Sinai. You have any idea how stupid that is? And what's going to happen now that he has isolated the U.S. from the world, putting the pedal on the Iranian proxy war against Russia and then refueling it again, by his tariffs on the world, further weakening the U.S. position as the world's reserve currency for international trade, turning the EU against the United States as well as Asia, isolating the country, sanctioning Russia on a war that the United States started, doubling down now on those sanctions, saying that we're going to have huge, crippling sanctions on any business or any country that does business of any kind with Russia. That's the victim of this war. The United States started it and armed it, and funded it, championing it. It's really a bad situation. And what's going to happen is that the dollar is going to weaken and weaken against the other currencies. And finally, the only way to create the illusion of solvency with the U.S. debt at over $40 trillion and larger than any other in the world, unserviceable outside of the illusion of quantitative easing, which is the destruction of the value of the dollar by way of the Federal Reserve, or the not Federal Reserve, but the reserve currency status on the fiat currency, that going to collapse. The U.S. economy is going to collapse. And the only way to postpone America's bankruptcy will be to maintain the petrodollar arrangement with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is going to ask for something near and dear to Israel. He's going to ask for Israel served up on an economic platter, with Donald Trump being the next Neville Chamberlain, who's going to give the heart of Israel to Saudi Arabia, as well as control over the Temple Mount, as part of the two-state solution, such that Islamic jihadists won't just be surrounding Israel. They'll be armed to the teeth inside of Israel. That is your future. God has seen it. He's known what you've done to yourself. And so he has said you are rebellious. You are defiant. You're intensely and deeply murderous, suicidal. And so he's saying, I'm going to judge you. I'm going to inflict the appropriate penalty on you, talking about Israel's religious and political leaders. It says, I'm going to incarcerate the totality of you. And that's really bad. You got these old, ugly, disgusting rabbis claiming that they speak for God and that their Torah studies, which are nothing but Talmud studies, are saving Israel when God is saying, I think they're murderous and genocidal, and I'm going to incarcerate them, which means they're going to Sheol. The proponents of religion are, from God's perception, and that's the only one that really matters, hostile to him. And they're hostile to the well-being of his people. They are deliberately pulling the unsuspecting away from the proper path, and they are suicidal, and they are a problem that God's going to deal with. They've earned a ticket to hell. God continues, I myself am aware that Ephraim ashes, and Yisrael struggling with God. They're not hidden from me. For now, Ephraim, worthless specks of carbon, is unfaithful, immoral, and disingenuous as a religious whore, and Israel is defiled. Hosea 5:3. This is actually a pronouncement that is prophetic of the adulterous woman in the Torah. You'll find it in Bamidbar, Numbers 5. And the story is that there is an exceedingly deserving groom that is coming from his chamber, and he wants to have Israel as his wife. He wants to be betrothed again to his people. But unfortunately, that can't happen because his desired bride, Israel, is a whore. And she's filthy from God's point of view. And the bridegroom here is David, God's beloved son, the returning Messiah, our king. And Yahweh is not going to conduct a marriage between his beloved son and a whore. He did that once before. That's the story of Hosea. He told Hosea to marry a religious whore so that Hosea would have some empathy for what God was enduring with Israel. You are that whore, Israel. Yeah. And so the purpose of Numbers, Midbar 19, which is the story of the Adamah Parah, thought to be the red heifer. It's actually the productive man of the earth who is fruitful as a bull. His purpose, my purpose, is to prepare you for that wedding, which will take place on the day of reconciliations. How about that? Yahweh's homecoming and the family reunion on Yom Kippur in year 6000 Yah, which is October 2nd, 2033. And Israel, if you're going to attend that family reunion, you're going to need to get prettied up. You're going to need to have your whoredom removed. Yes, you need a religious octomy. Political octomy. You need all traces of religion and politics removed so that you can stand before your Messiah and God. And that's the purpose of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. It has been a very long time since Jews listened to their God or even spoke his name. They asked him to shut up and go away, and he honored that request. And instead, he spoke through a brilliant group of prophets, and he chose some, well, he thinks articulate witnesses. You may not think so because you don't like what I have to say. But what I have to say is what God wants you to hear. And while Yahweh's people are only marginally more responsive now, this is going to change. Although the fact remains that for the past 3,000 years, according to God, Jews have been their own worst enemy. Well, they created the three Abrahamic religions that have been so caustic to the lives of Jews. God continues. Their cultural traditions, their societal customs, their religious practices and political dealings, him, do not preclude a return to their God. Indeed, it is certain that an illegitimate and duplicitous spirit is within them. Therefore, they do not know, they do not understand, they're unaware of Yada Yahowah. Hosea, he delivers 5:4. God is saying that he is disgusted by Israel's and Jewish cultural traditions, social customs, religious practices, and political dealings. And that these things preclude a relationship with God. It's true that the first condition of the covenant is to distance oneself from religion and politics, to walk away from Babel, to separate oneself from her father's house, from the culture and the society of man's corruptions. Babel, of course, is the intermixing and commingling of that which is true and false, particularly in religion and politics. And that's really what Judaism is and what politics are. You take platitudes here and there and snippets of that which is true, and then you mix it all together with a bunch of lies, and all you end up doing is making the religion and political lies seem more credible when they're nothing but counterfeits. So God says that there is therefore an illegitimate and duplicitous spirit, a disloyal and immoral, unreliable and whorish religious spirit akin to a prostitute within them. He views rabbis as prostitutes because they sell themselves for the pretense of affection and love. Therefore, they do not Yada Yahowah. These books behind me are all under the brand Yada Yahowah. This is something that God wants his people to know. Excuse my reach Wookiee. Yada Yahowah. That's what he just said. Therefore, they do not Yada Yahowah. That is only solved if you Yada Yahowah. Go to Yada Yah or YADA-YAHOWAH.com and you'll see 35 books on that shelf, all free. If you want to participate in the Shabuah harvest, if you want to be betrothed to the Messiah and King upon his return, if you want to survive the time of Yaakov's troubles, if you would actually like to Yada Yahowah, know Yahweh, I would encourage you to read all of them. Oh, this, of course, remains true for the overwhelming majority of Israelites and Yehudim. And so, with only 2 years remaining before the Shabuah harvest, I should correct myself there, it's only 13 months now remaining to the Shabuah harvest. It's going to take place 7 years prior to Dod's return with Yahweh, which occurs in year 6,000 Yah, which is 2033, exactly 40 Yobel from year 4,000 Yah, and 33 CE, when Dod was last here, fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bokorim. And you subtract, well, how many years? What's the name of the feast? It is Shabuah, 7 sevens. Subtract 7 years from 2033, and you are in 2026. And the time of Yaakov's troubles, according to Dod, will last 7 years. Therefore, 7 years before the return in 2033, year 6,000 Yah, on Shabuah would be the Shabat of May 22nd, 2026. At this point, Miss Whoop will be there. Wookie, I'm hoping that you're there. We're going to celebrate Passover with the best of them here in less than 2 weeks. And we're inviting you to attend. If you want to read the invitation, you'll find it at yadayah.com. Open the books, read them. In fact, this entire series is based upon this particular volume of Yada Yahowah called Qatsyr Harvest. So with just 13 months remaining before the Shabuah harvest and 8.5 at the time of this program in April of 2025, before the fulfillment of Teruah and the preparation of the adulterous woman so that she can be betrothed to the returning Messiah, well, all of these attitudes must change for there to be productive harvests and a reconciled marriage. It is important to note that the prophecy pertaining to this day and mankind's issues during it was punctuated with a negation of the title under which, as I have pointed out, this book that I'm basing this program on and every other book that I've written is heralded, Yada Yahowah. So you can consider it an endorsement or an invitation, something that Yisrael has not heard in a very long time and needs to have resonate so that they rebut the political and religious. Moreover, The pride and arrogance of Israel testifies against his presence. Therefore, Israel, those who contend and struggle with God, and Ephraim, worthless specks of carbon, will falter. They will stumble and fall, and they will be overthrown in their perversions, corruptions, and libelous errors. Yehudah, the beloved of Yah, will also waver and succumb along with them. The time of Jacob's troubles is going to be a horrible period for Israel, not because Yahweh makes it so, but because Israel makes it so. Your continued arrogance against God. You're a people who will not even say his name. You erased his name from his own testimony. You are prideful. You are arrogant. You are constantly agitating God. And therefore, God says, you are testimony against yourselves. Therefore, Israel, your perversions, your corruptions, and your errors are working against you. And you're going to stumble and fall yet again. So as bad as things appear now in the wake of worldwide protests against Israel following the Islamic assault against the nation on October 7th, 2023, they're going to get decidedly worse and really in an unimaginably horrible way. Yahweh told us so thousands of years ago, and that he revealed that it was going to happen because he has seen our future and he wants his children prepared. And if they are prepared, they're going to speak out against Muslims and progressives who are bringing this wrath upon them. And while the tiny nation will not be completely destroyed, there will be a surviving remnant. Therefore, the people will not be exterminated as the Mujahideen seek. But the death cult of Islam is going to come surprisingly close. Within their flocks and among their herds, they will travel about to search for a way to hold Yahweh responsible and to conspire against Yahweh, but they will not achieve what they seek. He has withdrawn from them. Wow. It is true that rabbis are particularly pleased with themselves for writing God out of their Talmud and their religious texts, their lives, their religion, because that way the highest calling, the most authorized voices are that of rabbis. And they blame, of course, Yahweh for it because, they don't like him very much. And they won't even say his name. And Jews for a very long time have been ostracized from God, and they have blamed him for their failings. They will occasionally give him credit if they win a miraculous battle, but he's not fighting for Israel. Not now. He will. But he can't fight for Israel now because he doesn't know Israelis. They don't know him. He can't fight for those who oppose him. If he had fought on behalf of Israel now with progressive and religious Jews, he would be aiding and abetting those who hate him. So he can't do that. And while so many have accused Yahweh and denounced him, erased his name, eliminated his presence from people's lives, replaced his Torah with a Talmud or a New Testament or a Quran, God says, I'm having nothing to do with this. I'm simply going away. I'm removing myself from you. I will not be in your presence. You ought not speak about me because I'm not there. I have no influence on you. You cannot achieve what you want, which is to conspire against me, because I'm not even part of your lives. And that is because you have been untrustworthy and unreliable, having betrayed and been treacherous in your dealings with Yahowah. God didn't pick this fight, Jews did. And they picked this fight by creating the religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and are not only responsible for socialism and communism, and therefore progressive, woke, cancel culture politics, they are participants in this to a much greater extent than their overall percentage of the population. And God says, you've been untrustworthy with Yahowah. That's why I'm here. It's why I'm telling you these stories. It's why I wrote these books and why you didn't write these books and why there isn't a Yehudim reintroducing Yehudim to Yahowah.
Nope, I love.
For now, they have fathered and brought forth offspring who are illegitimate and estranged children. Therefore, the crescent moon will devour them along with their land. It's a whole lot of centuries. 30 some odd, 34 centuries that you've been estranged from Yahowah. With only brief moments of the relationship taking shape, and even then with the minority of the people. And that must change. And the final catalyst for that change will be the threat to the very survival of Israel. You're going to be put right to the brink, where the crescent moon is going to essentially devour Israel and the land, killing Jews at a much greater rate than was witnessed during the Holocaust, and doing so this time in Israel. That is the prophecy of Hosea 5:7. And I'm going to be there to witness this, along with Elia. I will be doing everything, we will be doing everything we can do to get your attention, because you don't have to be part of the carnage. You can be set apart and protected from it. You can be part of that final remnant. You can be part of those who enjoy the ingatherings of Shabu and Towrah. Or you can wait to the very end and be among those who are reunited with Dod and Yahowah upon their return. But understand, should they not return as promised on October 2nd, 6:22 p.m. as the sun sets in Jerusalem, on October 2nd, 2033, Muslims would completely devour Jews and the land of Israel. There would be nothing left. And if Elia and I did not arrive to call out a remnant to save the willing, God wouldn't return, because there would be no family reunion without a family. Israelites have flocked together more than any other race or cultural group, even when exiled from their homeland, having migrated throughout the Middle East, Europe, and the New World, encountering anti-Semitism wherever they have gone. Rabbis have sought to hold God accountable for the poor reception and subsequent torment. Of course, their poor reception and subsequent torment were largely because of Christianity, and then later because of Islam. Both religions are overtly anti-Semitic. Christian New Testament literally demonizes and dehumanizes Jews, blaming Jews for crucifying the wannabe Christian God. And they do it, of course, because they want to steal the promises that are made by God to Israel and to Jews, and they can't do that without causing their God to hate Jews to the extent he's willing to welch on a promise. And of course, Islam is the most anti-Semitic religion ever conceived, and also the deadliest. Having rebelled against Yahweh's instructions, the consequence of which is to be excluded from his protection, leaving Israel and Jews vulnerable to Muslims, who are represented, of course, by the crescent moon. And this is particularly sad when one realizes that by selling those Talmud citations to Muhammad that he twisted to create the Quran, rabbis aided and abetted the religion which declared war on Jews 14 centuries ago. And that the colloquial definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing over and over again while expecting a different result. One must ask why, after 3,000 years of subjugation and abuse, are Jews continuing to act the same way? Not only toward God, but preferring their religion and politics over a relationship with the Yahweh, to come home, to be protected, and to live. This must change. And so, to encourage that result, I wrote the following poem, which has subsequently been turned into a song by the same covenant member who once worked with me, but has now sought to betray me. So I know some of what God is dealing with. Shalom, Yisrael. Peace in this time of war. The Shem of El will open heaven's door. Why have you erased my name? I know you, but you do not know me. Isn't that a shame? Moshe told you, Yahweh is my Shem, right in my Torah, and without synonym. I spoke with you then, in blazing flame and booming voice, but you pushed me away. It was not your best choice. Now I call out again, Yisrael Shalom. Listen, hear my call. Why roam when you can come home? You have gone it all alone. It has not worked out well. Living in denial, you put me on trial. So now, where are you to dwell? Do tell. You are becoming hated by everyone. You are a house divided. While I still love you, why remain misguided and undecided? Moshe told you, Yahweh is my Shem, right in my Torah, and he did so without synonym. Look up, not down. There is life in my name. This isn't a game, but you bear the blame all the same. Terrorists attack. More will come. I could stop them if not for the rabbinical scum. In this time of trouble, you need not succumb. Some will rely on me, and they will have chosen a different outcome. So now I have a herald. He sings for me. He sings to you. It's time you sing on key and agree. Moshe told you, Yahweh is my Shem, right in my Torah, and without synonym. Yahweh is my Shem. Yahweh, and Yehudim have been suffering through a protracted divorce. But God has not forgotten his people, seeking a different outcome based upon a change in attitude. Yahweh asks in advance of Shabuah and the fulfillment of Towrah. Below, sound, blasting the shofar upon the Gebarah, the hill, with the clarion, and Ramah, the heights. Signal an alarm and shout for joy at Beth Awon, the home of trouble. It is the end for you as the other Benjamite. Hosea, he saves. Hosea 5:8. The purpose of the shofar is twofold. It is to sound an alarm that something very dangerous is headed your way, and to call the people to a meeting where something important will be announced for their benefit. The shofar is synonymous with two of Yahweh's Moed Mikre, Shabuah and Towrah. On Shabuah, we sound the shofar because this is the warning. This is the time of Yaakov's troubles. It begins on Shabuah and lasts 7 years. Muslims are coming to kill you. Progressives have their backs. Your politicians and your religious are making the situation worse, not better. The next attack's going to be 1,000 times worse than 10/7. That is the warning. The world has turned against you. The only way out is the message that is being heralded by the man of Shabuah, the Zeroah, the one cultivating this final harvest. The king's Bashar, his herald, the very coal voice of Yahweh. The man from Edom who will save many. Stop erasing Yahweh's name. Accept it, know it, proclaim it. Stop parading under that star and embrace Yahweh's menorah. That is his symbol. It should be your symbol. It is my symbol. And oh, by the way, it has 7 lights, not 9. And those lights represent the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim by the chosen one, Hamashiach, the Melech of Yisrael, the very Son of God, to David. As his herald and as the Adamah Parah, as the man from Edom, I am not only that candle in the middle, but it is also the symbol of Shabuah, the next harvest. And I'm inviting you to join me. The last 3 candles on that menorah represent the 3 Moed Mikre that will be fulfilled in year 6000 Yah 2033, beginning with Towrah, the day of the herald, against the backdrop of a solar eclipse, September 23rd and 24th in 2033, followed 10 days later by Yom Kippurim and the betrothal of Yisrael to Dod, the Messiah and King, when he returns with your God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Yishak, and Jacob, the one for whom I speak on your behalf. And then 5 days later, the entire earth will be transformed, and the conditions experienced in the Garden of Eden, as all traces of religion and politics are expunged from this planet, and it is restored. And we can celebrate Sukkah together forevermore. That is what that shofar is sounding on Shabuah. It will sound again on Towrah, because Towrah is going to be the greatest show on earth. Yes, indeed. There will be a final gleaning of God's people as the sun sets on the Friday evening, the beginning of the Shabat of Towrah in 2033, September 23rd in that year. And it will be an olive gleaning, as the chodar, as the very stick that will shake that tree and knock off those olives that are ready to be harvested by God. And they will rise into the seventh dimension that evening. But at that same time, I, as the Zeroah, the crag, will be keeping a remnant of Yisrael back, protecting them. And then on the next day, I will prepare them, because I will be the sacrifice of what's called the red heifer, although it is the Adamah Parah, the bloody red man of the earth, who is the most productive of bulls. And I'm going to allow Satan to take my life, to sacrifice my physical body, my Bashar. Just as Dod's Bashar was sacrificed by Rome to fulfill Passover, mine will be sacrificed by the ultimate beast, the corporal manifestation of Satan himself on the southern end of the Temple Mount, overlooking the city of Dod. And that's when the show begins. Because Eliah is going to be the master of ceremony. He's going to reprise what he did 40 Yobel previous. 20 Yobel previous. 40 Yobel previous. I had that correct. 40 Yobel, 2,000 years. 40 Yobel, 888 years previous to this, when he orchestrated the sacrifice of another bull to embarrass and condemn the propensity of his people to be political and religious. But that's just the beginning of it, because Yahweh is going to release a torrent of water from underneath my dead body sacrificed for Israel that will purge Israel, along with this fire that he is going to ignite, which flames will dance up into the heavens as the waters fall off the Temple Mount and prepare the adulterous woman that is Israel for her wedding to the returning Messiah Dod just 10 days from that moment. It will be a grand spectacle. And one way or another, I would like you to be there. Whether it is you're one of those who returns from Shabuah and that harvest, you return the following day as an immortal being on Towrah, or you're there as this final remnant. That is the purpose of this final blasting of the shofar. Blow the shofar, this ram's horn, upon Ha-Gibah, the hill, with the clarion in Ha-Ramah, the heights. What do you think the hill is? What do you think the heights are? It's Moriah, Olives, Zion. Signal the alarm and shout for joy. Ruah, the basis of Towrah, at Beth Awan, the home of trouble, because the troubles are finally over. You can come home. It is the end for you as the other Benjamite. The other Benjamite, of course, is the most horrible of them. Shaul, Paul, that created the religion of Christianity. It's over for Christianity. It is over for rebellious Jews. The shofar is blown to announce the two Moedim that are harvest, Shabuah, Towrah, as is the case with both. They are joyous homecomings to Yah, and the alarm is being sounded against a troublesome Benjamite known as Paul, the founder of the Christian religion, second and third only to Judaism. Christianity and Islam represent the longest standing and most debilitating foes of the Jewish people. This realization is underscored by the realization that religious Jews are directly associated with Benjamin. And that's sad because he is the wolf in sheep's clothing devouring Israel, just as Yahweh predicted during the birthright ceremony of Benjamin. He would be the wolf. He would be the one devouring Israel. And while the identity of these adversaries is relevant, are you aware that the one Yahweh is asking to sound the shofar is the same individual he tasked with writing volumes of Babel, goddamn religion, and Twistianity to expose the hostile and false nature of the religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, while at the same time encouraging his people to participate in the Shabuah and Towrah ingatherings and to be present for the Kippurim homecoming throughout the entirety of the Yada Yahowah series, and now as part of this Yahowah blog? Well, as affirmation, consider this next prophetic declaration. Ephraim, worthless specks of carbon, will be horrified and desolated, which will occur in the day of rebuke and impeachment, along with the various tribes of Israel, those who contend and struggle with God. At that time, I will reliably make Yada known. Yada Aman. I will be known and acknowledged for being truthful, dependable, and enduring. With Yada and the Hiphil perfect, God is acting at a certain point in time to acknowledge and make known Aman, that which in the Niphil participle reveals that he will carry out and receive the benefits of being reliable with Yada in a profound way. Hosea, he saves 5:9. More than any other mission, Yada is charged with the responsibility of cultivating the Shabuah harvest and the Towrah ingathering, as well as the preparation of the adulterous woman for her betrothal to the ultimate groom, the very Son of God. It is from this planet-wide outbreak of religious and political deception, all emanating with rabbis, and the impending violence that will come, that I'm here to prepare the covenant's children for 7 sevens, for the day of the herald, for Yahweh's homecoming and family reunion, and for our return to Eden on Sukkah. The shofar, ram's horn, provides an elegant and boisterous, piercing resonance when blown correctly. It is the trumpet Yahweh selected to herald his announcements of Shabuah and Towrah for these harvests. They represent the last call, God's final invitations to come home. His people will either tune in to his summons and respond to the warnings and provisions he is providing, and we are articulating, or life will be over for them. Yehudim, who have turned a deaf ear to the final blast of the shofar on Shabuah and Teruah, will likely remain estranged come Yom Kippurim. They will miss Sukkah, the return to the garden, and the time to camp out with our Father. Now, this realization is not only important to you, Yisrael, but to me as well. You see, I was summoned by Yahweh on Teruah, the day of Ruah, of signaling the alarm and shouting for joy, in the fall of 2001, when there wasn't much joy, but there was quite an alarm. With other troubadours joining the chorus, we have Ben Taka trumpeting Yahweh's message as Ruah, as loudly and as openly as possible ever since. Throughout this prequel to Yahweh's return with Dode, we will address all those willing to listen, and particularly those who have been misled and who are unsuspecting in a world on the cusp of destroying itself, all while cultivating the harvest. This is our calling. This is our time. This is your moment. The government and religious leaders of Yehudah are perceived as untrustworthy and disloyal deviants. I will pour out a boundless amount of my righteous indignation and intense displeasure with an outburst of my disappointment upon them as if they were fluid. Hosea, he saves, Hosea 5:10. We have an opportunity right now to blow the shofar, and my lovely wife and producer is going to see if she can do it on a moment's notice. Wow. That got a pause up from Wookie, thumbs up from the host of your program. We're delighted to be able to conclude this presentation of the harvest of Shabuah and Teruah on that note. Thank you for listening.